Hey everybody, we have got a great show planned for you today on Racing to Real Estate. We are going to talk about investing in real estate. We are going to recap some of the NASCAR action from the weekend. And we have a very special guest, Matt Tifft, will be joining us. So let's get started. This is Racing to Real Estate.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to Racing to Real Estate. I'm John Roberts, he's Josh Tucker, and he is our special guest, Matt Tifft. We're glad to have you with us. We're broadcasting here from the Duckworths Studio in Anchor Real Estate in Mooresville. This is our little home away from home that we like to hang out with, and we're glad you're with us every Tuesday night on Racing to Real Estate. But before we get into all the business and everything, what'd you guys do this weekend? Josh, what'd you do?
Well, let's see, what did I do? We had, Michael came through. Hurricane Michael came through late last week. I guess that was on Thursday.
He was a tough old boy, wasn't he?
He was a little tougher than Florence on me. We had probably a 30 or 40 foot tree come down in the yard. Thankfully missed the house. Spent a little bit of time working around the yard over the weekend. I showed some houses to a buyer, 5 or 6 houses on Saturday. And yesterday just kind of laid low, watched Talladega and hung out. What about you, Matt?
We actually went to, the Xfinity Series had their off weekend. So,
yeah.
I did not go to the racetrack. We actually went to Gatlinburg and Nashville for the weekend. So,
nice.
Yeah. Okay. Went to a little Music City action, so it was a lot of fun.
That's
I had
John and Tracy's.
We used to live there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, recently sold a place in Nashville and moved everything over here, but we still go back a lot. I love Nashville. And Gatlinburg, I'm like Josh. I did TV on Fox in the morning, Saturday and Sunday, and then showed property in the afternoon. So it was all working, but if you can call it working, I'm not really sure doing a TV show is that much work. But don't tell the boss that. Okay? Don't tell the
and
boss.
real quick before we jump in, Matt, if John has a tendency on this show to hit the table really hard.
I did it again, didn't I?
And when he does that, it rattles our camera back there.
You want to see real quick?
Yeah. So if you see John doing that, just punch him in the shoulder a time or two to remind him.
Because I know who built this table. I did. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I built the table. So
part-time carpenter and a full-time real estate agent.
I just built it. So full-time is the real estate gig here, and that's what we like to talk about on Racing to Real Estate. And Matt, you're involved in some real estate investing. What's your goal? What got you into real estate, and what interests you about it?
So for me, I'm only 22 years old, so I guess I kind of got involved on the younger side of things. Yeah. But my buddy, I was working out with him last year, and he was talking about he took all of his stock investments and everything and started putting in real estate and started learning more, and he just liked the idea that it was so tangible and that you could actually go and see really what something was. So last October, I got some funding together and did my first deal here in Mooresville.
Nice.
And so a little single-family property, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, about 900 square feet, and I've had that great tenant in there for a year now, and led me to kind of doing a second deal in, I guess earlier this year in Salisbury, and got one more property in Winston-Salem. So
nice.
I think the ultimate goal is, being in racing, you never know what time you're going to have to hang the helmet up or anything like that. So for me, it was kind of being able to be in a position to build passive income. And I think my end goal is, to get to a point where I can be financially free to go do, what I want at some point and have that ability. So obviously it's great to be in racing, and I love that. I want to do that as long as possible. But I know even myself, just from being out with a brain tumor and everything, you never quite know when that end is going to be, whether you decide to do it or not.
Yeah, well, Josh, we talk about this every week on Racing to Real Estate because it's a good point. If you went and took your money, put it in the stock market, and you had a really good investment and a really good portfolio, you'd be super happy with maybe 3 to 4% return on your money. But if you were to have bought a house 1 year ago in the Mooresville area, on average, that investment would have gone up 8%. Your house in the median, most likely, is worth roughly 8% more than it was. Now, you put a tenant in there at the same time as you're collecting rent, it just looks like a very wise investment.
Yeah, and I think that, another thing to point out is, we've talked about it on the last few shows with interest rates being so low, and I think that's important for investors because I don't know, you say you put some funding together, so I assume, did you pay cash for your investment properties, or do you...
Yeah, so the first couple deals I did cash, and then at this point now for my future deals, I'm looking at financing them.
Yeah, because it's a great way to leverage your money, and that's something you can't really do in the stock market, right? Yeah. If you've got $10,000 to play with in the stock market, you put $10,000 in, and that's what your return is based off of. If you've got $10,000 to play in the real estate market, you might be able to turn that into $100,000 if you leverage the money with a lender, and all of a sudden now you have a $100,000 asset that you're appreciating, and like you said, it's a tangible, it's a durable asset. And another thing that struck my eye about in real estate investing is the big drop in the stock market last week. Traditionally, when you see big drops in the stock market, that will lead some investors to start pulling money out of the stock market and putting it into the real estate market, because it is a tangible investment, and they can kind of ride the storm out with a real estate investment, especially like you have mentioned, if they have a tenant in there and it's passive income. A good friend of mine has a lot of rental properties, calls it mailbox money, right? So he says, hey, it just kind of shows up in the mailbox, and I hopefully don't have to put a lot of time and effort into managing it. So I think the passive income part of it is great, and I think it's a great way to leverage money. If you have some extra money, you can turn it into more and really leverage it with real estate, which makes it unique or different than the stock market.
Yeah, great economic guy. I had the pleasure of doing a speech with, it was a good few years ago, but his name was John Augustine from Fifth Third Bank, and he put up a graph, and there was nothing on the graph, but it just went absolute cyclical across the screen. There's nothing around it. And then he popped up underneath of it the years of the American economy since the 1890s.
Yep.
And then he put economic indicators on the side. And what his point was, what he was getting at, and the way he got at it was very creative, but that no matter what is going on in the world, that the U.S. economy is basically cyclical. So if you panic when it's down low, you're going to mess yourself up.
That's right.
If you get too excited about it when it's high, you're going to mess yourself up. You got to ride the wave. And Matt, I think you're doing the right thing, riding that wave by having something solid like a tenant in a home.
Right. Yeah. And it just made sense to me, because I felt like, if I can have something that, to me, I mean, at first it was like, well, somebody's paying the mortgage for this thing already.
That's beautiful.
I'm not even having to pay that part of it, for some of those deals. So it's just, I don't know. To me, it just seemed like at a young age, if I could get started with this now and do 1 to 2 deals in the beginning of a year, and then obviously that starts to compound as things go on. But by the time I'm 35, I'd like to have enough properties to where I can kind of decide what I want to do, or maybe someday move into commercial real estate investing. But it's just certainly seemed like such a great idea that not a ton of people in my family circle were doing. So it just kind of was a unique thing to myself too.
Yeah, one of the wealthiest dudes I have ever known and ever gotten friendly with, whose name shall go unmentioned, but it was back in 2008, and we were sitting around the racetrack and we were talking, and my old buddy Jimmy Spencer, he told a good joke. He said, "What do you call Bob the Builder during the recession?" Bob. So it was a good bit. So that just kind of sparked the conversation. In 2008, everybody was panicking. So, the real successful guys in the room, we said, "Hey, what are you guys doing with your money right now? How are you reacting to this?" And smartest guy in the room, which was definitely not me, definitely not the richest guy in the room, said, same thing I've always done. I haven't wavered at all. I said, okay, what is that? He said, commercial real estate. He says his entire investment portfolio, besides his business interests, have been commercial real estate, because let's face it, they ain't making any more earth.
Yeah.
And also houses are kind of at a premium these days. So it's just, all in all, no matter how you look at it, it just seems like it's solid, and it's working out for you.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and I think that's it's gone so well that my question in my head, like I was saying, is, well, at some point I probably should, kind of transfer over to the multifamily or commercial side of things, just because you get the long-term leases in there, you get the larger properties, and if you can get enough cash builds up to leverage, you can leverage an $800,000 or $1 million asset in there. So that's the part that excites me to start building towards that point, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I had another very successful man say something. I got to change the words because this is a family program. But, he said, "John, the only difference between a rich man and a poor man is a little bit of," I'll say guts. He used a different,
Okay,
it's like, it's a little
imagine.
bit, it's braveness, right, Josh? You got to take there's no reward without a little bit of risk. And if you're going to go out on a limb somewhere, why not something as tangible and solid as real estate?
No, I agree. And like like I just said earlier, I think the stock market, that's just as big a risk as real estate.
Yep.
And I think if you look at the history over thing. I mean, I think real estate is a solid investment because it always appreciates. Well, let's say it doesn't appreciate. Let's say, in a down market, you lose a little bit of the worth of the property, but during the down market, there's a lot of renters out there. So you're still going to have the cash flow coming from it. And then when the market turns and your asset appreciates again, you've got something that's worth more than it was when you bought it. So I think investing period is always a risk. There's always a risk associated, but if you're willing to stomach the risk, the reward can be great.
Yeah, and my father was really good with money, and I don't know why it didn't rub off on me. Unfortunately, a lot of things didn't rub off, but he was always really wise with his investments and everything. And I remember because we told this story before, he was all excited back in the 1970s because he got this interest rate at 13%. He said, "Yeah, man, I just got a mortgage at 13%. This is cool." So, well, that ain't that cool these days. We're still at 5%, which is fantastic. But I do remember some of the numbers on that, and this was in the suburbs of Washington D.C. And it's not your normal situation. He got a 30-year mortgage, something like 5% down or something like that, and they stayed in the house for 30 years, almost to the day. 30 years. Well, he paid $72,000 for the house and made those mortgage payments all the years. And then all of a sudden, 30 years goes by and it's time to go. They resold that house for $895,000.
Oh my gosh!
So $72,000 price, $895,000 on the way out the door. So
math has never been one of my strong suits, but that's a good return.
That sounds pretty good.
I can't add that one up in my head real quick, but that's
even with
pretty
the
good.
new math.
Yeah.
Me neither. That's why we have engineers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know something about math. There's only one guy who wins a NASCAR race.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the one guy who won it yesterday was Eric Almirola.
Sure
Eric
was.
Almirola. At least you pronounced his name correctly.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Amarillo is a city in Texas. Almirola drives race cars.
That's right.
And Josh, you know what I'm doing with a big 2x4 over somebody's head as I'm making the transition to racing.
Yeah. So, man, I thought Talladega was a interesting race. Different. It was a different Talladega than I've ever seen before, whether in person while I was in the sport or sitting at home watching. From the regard of I've never seen a team, Stewart-Haas Racing, go out and dominate a restrictor plate race.
Yeah, all 4 cars right up front, basically the same.
The whole race.
Yeah.
I think there was one run after a caution where there was a little shakeup in pit strategies. Some cars stayed out, and the 4 Stewart-Haas cars weren't all together. But man, I'm telling you, that was a 188 lap race. I would say for 120 of them, the Stewart-Haas cars were 1 through 4.
Exactly.
And I've never seen that before. Very interesting.
So before we dive into the race, should we take a quick break? Come back with Matt.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a quick 30-second break here from our sponsor, Duckworths, and we will be right back.
Duckworths Grill and Tap House is your neighborhood restaurant. Good food, good friends, a huge selection of craft beers on tap, not to mention the weekly and daily food specials. 5 locations in the Charlotte metro area. Make sure to go down and check out your local Duckworths.
And welcome back, everybody, to Racing to Real Estate. I'm Josh Tucker, our co-host John Roberts. We have Matt Tifft with us here, driver of the number 2 Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet Camaro in the Xfinity Series. So before we jump into Talladega, let's just talk to Matt a little bit here. I'm eager to hear, Matt, kind of your upbringing in the sport. I mean, obviously now you're a Xfinity driver, driving for one of the most prominent owners in NASCAR. But what kind of got you into racing? What did you have a family background in racing? Did your mom or your dad or somebody have a background in it, or what kind of got you interested in?
Yeah, so I guess going back to there, my dad he raced some street stocks when he was younger, so really not a whole lot in there. But then in about 2001, the guy he used to race street stocks with and grew up going to high school with, they bought a dirt late model together. And I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, so they went to school in Michigan. So they got the dirt late model, and his friend David Hilliker drove it. And so my dad owned that car for, I want to say 9 or 10 years, something like that. And so when I was little, I'd grow up going to Michigan. The rest of my family was up there, so we'd go up in the summer and watch the races. And so I kind of had the bug from when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And so, of course, the question was always, okay, when can I do this? When can I do this? And, of course, in the beginning, it's just bugging, and you're a little kid and you want to go do it. But eventually I was down in Nashville, actually at the Nashville Super Speedway, and for my dad's Father's Day present, we got him the Jeff Gordon school ride-around deal. So
Oh, nice.
I got to do the passenger side thing, and then he got to drive a different car there, and that happened. I was all the people are getting out, and they're freaking out, like, terrified and stuff. And I was like, I don't know, that was pretty cool.
And how old are you at this point? What?
I was 10.
10. Okay. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was like, yeah, that was pretty cool. And they're like, you didn't think that was scary? I was like, no, I thought that was fun. So, and from that point, that was in the summer. And so after that point, into the next year when I turned 11, it was just constant bugging of getting,
Get behind the wheel.
Yeah, to get behind the wheel and figure out what I wanted to do. So looked at Bandoleros, looked at Legend cars, and eventually found go-karts. This little track by us, they had a trial day where you could go out and try go-karting. So did that and fell in love with it. And for my birthday, parents got me a go-kart. And
The rest was kind of history.
yeah. So did that, moved into super late models in Wisconsin and Florida, and eventually kind of got involved with Kenny Schrader on the ARCA side, and eventually into the NASCAR ranks.
Okay, I was going to ask you, that was my next question. So that's a tough transition, right? To go from racing late models regionally or in a state or two to then transition to ARCA or a K&N car or whatever it was that you did. How did that in with Kenny Schrader happen? Like, what was the details behind that?
So after we did some late model races, I started racing with Wintron Racing, and we raced with them for, I guess, a year in the K&N series, and one of the people in there knew someone from Ken Schrader Racing, so I got hooked up with them, and in our philosophy, kind of from the beginning, you're talking about the big jumps and big learning curves in there. We knew when I first started go-kart racing, the thing we'd see at every single level was people would get very hooked into winning the track championship year after year after year, but there's no end goal in it at all. So when I was 13, we kind of sat down when I started racing late models and said, okay, where is this going to go someday? Like, there's got to be some plan of what's going to happen here.
Yep.
So I remember I had to write a proposal to my mom. Of, like, she's a businesswoman, so she was like, all right, you have to write a proposal.
That's good training.
Had to do the same thing for a cell phone, too. So. But anyways, so, it was almost like a year-by-year plan of what we do, and once the scheme of it was, once I got competitive in a certain level, we moved to the next one and moved to the next one and kind of ski jump and keep the progress moving forward. And I think that worked really well, I'd say, honestly, up until about last year when I got in the Xfinity Series full-time, because then you're kind of at the landing point of, okay, you're here and there's really one more step to go. So I felt like last year was a huge learning year for me, just to be doing it full-time for the first time. But then also, going in 2018, switching race teams and doing all those kinds of things to where, now we've been very competitive on the brink of getting our first win.
Yep.
But, it was just now that we've finally made it all the way to there to ski jump in there, eventually you got to kind of focus and learn how you make yourself even better in a championship caliber driver. So still learning those things every weekend, but it's definitely been a fun journey, and it's kind of crazy that it started all from a certain point where we listed out the whole proposal there, and we looked back at it almost year to year we made that happen.
What a lot of people don't really realize, and it's always astonished me, is on any given weekend there's a couple thousand guys playing baseball and getting paid for it. You take all the racers in the world and in the United States, and you look at, there's less than 100 drivers, 80 drivers in the Xfinity and the Cup Series that get to race on any given weekend. That puts you guys in a very elite class. This is not easy to do. I know you got one more goal. I know the goal is to get to the Cup Series, but the fact that you've made it, I mean, you got to be really proud, and you have to look back and say, hey, man, I've done some things right to be in the position you're in.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's crazy because in my eyes, I just grew up a fan. Like, I just loved watching racing. I was a big Jeff Gordon fan.
Me too.
Were you really?
Who was it?
Yeah. So, I remember all the days of we'd go to Homestead, Miami every year. So, the first experience of actually racing there was pretty cool to me, and getting my first truck. My first truck started in Martinsville. That was one of my favorite tracks we'd go watch races at. And really, it was kind of like I lived out every fan's dream of like, oh, I want to go do that someday. and here I am. So it's strange because when you're in the battle and you're in the week to week process of it, it's definitely you're so focused on that. But when you kind of take a step back and realize what you're doing, I mean, I think they say 1% of athletes make it. I think that number's got to be less for race car drivers because the numbers on that. Yeah. So the fact that I get to do this at any level or capacity and have this be my my living right now is incredible, and I'm definitely so grateful that I get to do it because it's the best job in the world.
Yeah, I actually did read that actually in Sports Illustrated. I remember reading it. It's something like high school athletes that get to play in college. It's like 1.2% or something like that. College athletes that turn pro is less than 1%. So I would have to say, with all the dirt trackers and all the go-karters,
it's got to be similar to that.
Yeah, it's got to be very similar to that.
If not less.
Yeah, if not less.
Yeah.
Just a very, very unique and elite group of guys, and congratulations for making it into that. That's it's just a big accomplishment.
It is, and you mentioned just a minute ago taking a step back, and talking about taking a step back in 2016, you had a major thing happen in your life, and I want to kind of hear quickly that side of that story, if I understood it correctly or if I remember correctly, just from what media and other people were talking about 2 years ago when it happened, it kind of started with a back injury. Is that right?
It did.
And then it led into, you learned a lot more.
Yeah, so it actually would have been about this race weekend where I was first injured. So I was in the truck race at Talladega, and I got caught up in the big one. It didn't seem like that big of a crash. I just kind of got hit from two sides, and I guess I just felt like my back was a little bit tweaked, but I stretched it out, whatever, no big deal. Went through the off season and kind of rolled into 2016. So that was in October of 2015 that first happened, and it just kept on reoccurring. So eventually I went and got it checked out in the spring. But before then, all of a sudden I started having these just very anxious thoughts and kind of being paranoid, and I would go down the road at night and have voices in my head, and I was like, all right, that's getting a little weird.
Yeah.
And the climax of it was we went to Cancun for vacation. We had a few weeks off there, and I remember we were sitting in a restaurant, and they had a live band playing and stuff, but all of a sudden they started using lights and everything. And I'm a pretty calm guy, and I like doing social things, and all of a sudden I just had this feeling of the whole place is going to collapse, like everything's going to go, like just a full-out panic attack, basically. And it was just very strange, and after that point, I started having to take almost 5 to 7 Excedrins a day just to deal with the pain of my head and my back at the same time. So it was just a bad deal, and my girlfriend goes, all right, this is kind of enough. Like, you need to go get this checked out. So I was going in for the back scan, and I talked to Dr. Petty from the NASCAR neurological team, and he said, okay, this is definitely something we need to get checked out if you don't mind sitting there for 15 more minutes in the MRI. No problem. So went in there and found that they had about a $50 size mass sitting in my right frontal lobe. And so went and got a biopsy a few weeks later, and turned out it was a brain tumor. So it was shocking, and all of a sudden we're looking at racing each and every weekend to all of a sudden going, okay, what's really going to happen here? And I didn't know what it meant at the time, but so July 1st, this was all in the beginning of June, and then July 1st I had my surgery that took that piece of brain out of me. Today I'm still living with a big hole in my head. There's just a big old circle in there. It'll never fill up.
That is wild.
Yeah, but luckily it was not cancerous. We caught it before it was benign. But I'm 2 years out now, so it's incredible. All those things that I started to have, those anxious thoughts and everything, have gone away. And it's kind of like I remember now feeling like this probably in middle school, which is crazy. So I probably had the tumor in there for since I was probably 9 or 10, and it just didn't really start to show up until later in high school and eventually in college. So, but today being 2 years out, I like to try to use racing as an advocacy platform and really push for change. And I got to go down to Washington, D.C. these last 2 years and go to Capitol Hill and talk to congressmen and women about political change to get more funding and research for development of brain tumor cures.
Wow.
Awesome. There's 2 good positives out of it. First of all, you're okay and you're working to help things. That's fantastic. And I remember reading the story, and when you first hear brain tumor, you think the worst.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hope for the best. But I'm so glad that the best happened out of this.
Yeah. No, thank you. And it's crazy because you do think that. And I actually had my step grandmother. She passed away from a brain tumor, and so you're thinking all those things. And I think the biggest reason why is there's I think 140 different types of brain tumors, and there's only 4 treatments for all of them. And all 140 brain tumors have grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. So you multiply that. So it's definitely been a big mission of mine to go and trying to change that and just help patients, because you feel like you're alone in that thing. And it's just been a big goal of mine is to try to help people out with that.
I bet, and I mean, I remember how quickly you rebounded from that. It was amazing because I mean, it was the talk every weekend. When you were watching these races, you were the headline, and I remember, when you finally made it back. I think it was late that year, maybe one of the last 2 or 3 races, Phoenix or Texas.
Yeah, like between September and October, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and I remember them saying from the time that you laid down in that hospital bed to have surgery to the time you're back at the racetrack is only like a handful of months.
Yeah, it actually only ended up being about 3 months.
I mean, that to me just seems insane that, you're laying in the hospital having brain.
Motivation.
Absolutely. And it shows you have motivation. I mean, look at how far you've made it in your career. Let's take it. It takes somebody with persistence and motivation to make it to that level. I mean, obviously you have a lot of talent. You have to have that as well, but you have to have the motivation, and you have that obviously, and it shows just from what you've been through. I mean,
yeah, thank you. No, it was a crazy ride. I mean, I'm glad I'm on the other side of it for sure.
Yeah. So talk about crazy ride. You obviously watched Talladega yesterday.
I did, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you watched to learn anything else. It was like we started talking about a second ago. It was domination by Storehouse Racing, and then one of them ends up in the win column, and kind of shook up the playoffs a little bit. But as far as Talladega races go, I mean, we were just on our feet pretty much the whole time.
Yeah, it was an interesting race because I think the race looked a lot like some of the '90s races there.
Yeah,
and I think it's a product of the ride height rule in the Cup cars. They've let them drop the backs of these cars down the last few races, and the more they get the rear of these cars down, the less drag and the faster they go, which means, of course, the worse they handle.
Yeah. Right.
Which is why I think you're starting to see some of that single file racing, some of the guys struggling with handling. The other thing, too, is people forget that there's starting to get some age on the surface of Talladega.
That's a good point.
And, the tri-oval there, I remember running a truck and the Xfinity car there, that bump in there gets very violent, and it's hard to get, really stuck down on somebody like you could a few years ago. The other part of that, too, is you think back to the races we ran 2015 and before, we had much larger spoilers on these cars. So the handling of these cars is way worse than it is now, and they're certainly a lot faster, too. So I know I saw next year they're going to have the drag duck package at some of these restricted plate tracks. That, I think, is going to be very interesting to see, because racing that in the Xfinity side of Indianapolis, it's almost like you have this slingshot effect if you can make the runs work the right way. So I think we'll see the Daytona 500 probably be a little bit like Sunday. But, man, I think it's going to be a totally new game once we get to Talladega in the spring.
And the competition level at the Xfinity Series for that championship, and then the Cup Series championship as well. Does the competition level surprise you about when there's maybe top 15, 20 teams, how tight it is?
Yeah, it's amazing, not only on the Cup side, but in the Xfinity side, what we're living with every week. Last year, it was easy to make it from the round of 12 to the round of 8. This year, it was tight, and for us, we had a 5th place finish, a 6th place finish, and we had a mediocre day at Dover, and it came down to 2 points to get us into the round of 8. So the guys that are in there, I mean, those are the ones competing for wins each and every week. And so at this point, it's all about execution. And just like on the Cup side, I mean, you look at someone like Jimmy Johnson, who had some good runs in there. One move can totally take you out of there. You just can't have mistakes, and you can't have a bad day. And we had a mediocre day that just about took us out of the playoffs. No mechanical failures, just a mediocre day. So you got to be on it. And it goes to the stage points too. Man, they're huge.
Yeah, and talking about playoffs, I mean, in the Cup race yesterday, we seen it. Some drivers late in the race having troubles, right? Some playoff drivers having troubles, fuel issues. I think Harvick, Keselowski, and Blaney, all three coming to take the green for the green-white checker restart, and they're running out of fuel. And man, that puts Keselowski in a huge hole.
Yep.
So here we are, John. We started our show. This is our 6th episode, and I remember on the very first show we were talking that we think Keselowski is now a favorite to go to Homestead and be the 4th guy to compete for a championship. And now, after trouble at Talladega, he finds himself, I think, 18 points below the cutoff line.
The format is cruel.
He's going to Kansas
This is a
now.
mean
Almost
format.
has to
It really
win.
is.
I mean,
This is cruel because, you can have. We're talking to Kurt Busch the other night, and he was talking about his championship. If his tire goes 1 foot to the other side, he doesn't win his championship.
I was there for that race.
For that, remember that one? That was the first ever what do we call the Chase? Yeah, back then it was a
Chase
sprint
for the Cup,
or Nextel Cup champion.
Yeah.
So Kurt wins that one. Tony Stewart's second championship. A lot of people don't know if a caution didn't come out, he was going to run out of gas. He wouldn't have had that one. And then you come again to where you have Tony and Carl Edwards.
Yep.
One position on the racetrack separates them.
Yeah.
And again,
they were tied. It went to a
they were
tiebreaker.
tied. It went to a tiebreaker. So it's an amazing format. It's great for the fans, but I think we always get back to this. And we talked about it last week with Larry McReynolds. What's good for the fans is not necessarily good for the competitors, and vice versa.
Yeah.
That's very true, and I think you're kind of seeing that, in some opinions of the rules package for next year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the deal is, in today's world, you got to put a good show on, and you got to walk the line between what is pure racing and what is good entertainment. So, being a driver, you're kind of up to the mercy of what they give you for rules. And at the end of the day, I'm a race car driver, and I'll do my job to the best of my ability, and the teams will do that too. So, the teams are never going to stop pushing the rules and pushing boundaries as much as they can. And I'm sure once we get to next year, you're going to see people figure it out, and it's not going to be as tight as it was, maybe before that All-Star race. I think the other thing people are forgetting too is we just had a little bit more experience on the Xfinity side because we ran 3 races with that package. But when the All-Star race started to go in the end of the segments, you actually started to break up some people. So I think once we get into the races, they're going to look a little bit more normal. It's just because the All-Star race is so short, it kind of made everything kind of jumbled up into a short sprint sort of a race.
Now, guys, feel free you can disagree with me if you want. Please feel free.
I'll be honest.
Okay, be honest. You guys, that's what we're here for. But I do not believe that there is a problem with NASCAR competition on the racetrack. I believe we have some parity, we have good competition, and the racing itself is a good product. I think people look too far at that product because there's lower viewership and there's fewer rear ends in seats at these racetracks. Now, if you look at those things, I just don't think it has anything to do with the product. And there I go, I hit the table again. Sorry, sorry, Paul. But so I just really think that the focus needs to be not on the competition. Let give you guys a rules package. Sure. Here's a rules package. Drivers, teams, go have at it. Don't worry about changing that so much. Let's worry about the fan experience at the track. Let's worry about, if we can, making the races shorter, making the season shorter, making it easier for the fan to get to the racetrack. Do you guys agree? Disagree?
Agree. Yeah, I think for myself, when I went to racetracks as a little kid, there's a lot more fan activities because sponsors put a lot more in hospitality and fan things. And people still do that, but you don't have it in the capacity that you used to have. So, but, I definitely see a time where we have midweek races or shorter seasons because, let's face it, we don't need to go 2-3 times a year to some of these racetracks.
Sure.
I think it's cool what Charlotte did with the Roval just to go and try to shake things up. Yep. I think that's a huge initiative in our industry to start doing that. I think you're starting to see more 2-day shows and those things kind of come about too. So I think there's definitely a right sizing of some of that stuff and how our schedules look that'll probably come over the next few years. I'd have to imagine. This is just speculating, obviously, but certainly this has got to be fun for the fans. And like you said, the drivers and teams are going to figure out one way or another. Yeah. But I think we need to worry about promoting and getting people back into it because not everybody, when we bring people to the racetrack, they love it, especially first-time people. Yep. We love bringing first-time people to the racetrack, and they have an awesome time. It's just how do you get them there?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I agree. I think the competition this year, or really over the last 2 years, is better than I've seen it.
It's good.
It's
really good.
It is really good.
Yeah, competition's good.
And so I this time agree with you, and a lot of times we don't agree,
Yeah.
and so but I do agree that it's not a competition problem. I think one thing quickly that to me that makes it harder for somebody to relate. I remember when I was younger, influential, started watching NASCAR. There were everybody had the same paint scheme, the same sponsor for every race, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I was a Jeff Gordon fan. It was the Rainbow Warrior,
24
it was
DuPont Chevrolet for the whole time.
And the car looked the same, and I could identify with that. And I think now a lot of it is money, right?
Yeah.
There's no longer sponsors coming in writing $20 million checks. So now teams have 3, 4, 5, 6 different sponsors. So every week the car looks different. It's a different paint scheme. It's a different sponsor.
Yeah, the 24 was yellow yesterday. It was a yellow Hertz, and I understand. They got to do that. You can't
Absolutely.
You can't fault owners because they're not. It's like it's like these guys always say. They're not the United Way. They're not a not-for-profit organization.
But I think for a younger fan that NASCAR needs to attract right now.
Yeah.
I think it's harder for them to relate or to identify to their driver than it was 15 or 20 years ago. Simply because you don't know who to look for on the racetrack. You don't know what color car you're looking for or what it's going to be this week versus
I think
next week.
that probably ties into merchandise and and branding of the cars
Absolutely.
too. And we're guilty of it. I think we've had 29, 30 races this year. We've probably had 13 different cars.
Yeah.
But it's just the environment we have today because the price to go run a race car is so high and the market value is a little bit below that. So you got to. You don't want, people just don't want to spend the entire season. If you break it up to certain races or markets, it works better for the company. So from the business side, we have to do it like that. And until we have a different environment there with the price of it, that's kind of what we have to do.
Are we heading towards a spec car?
I don't fully think so.
I hope not. I mean, I hope not. But
no, I mean the Xfinity series, we have a composite body this year.
Yeah.
So
and I think that's been good.
It's been good. I don't think you've seen any backlash from it at all. I think it's been a very durable body that.
And fans don't notice. I don't think I've never heard a fan say
if you are
that dang composite body is making the racing crappy. So they don't do that.
Exactly. So I think if you look, there's two things here. If you look at the Xfinity series, if you're a casual fan, nobody cares that it's a composite car. And if you look at the truck series, I'd say 90% of the field runs the spec Ilmor motors right now. And would they know? No. But what we do get told is that they have some of the best racing, that we see on TV. So I think that's why the Cup Series is going to a package that kind of makes the numbers similar, to a truck at that point. But I don't know. It's I don't know if the casual fan actually really will know that stuff or know the difference. And those might be the people we're trying to bring in as new fans that wouldn't know that stuff. So, like I said, there's a line somewhere. But.
And I think when a model stops working, I mean there are so many years. We went to dirt tracks. We also had telephone booths too.
Yeah.
When a model stops working, it's time to move on, especially in a business structure. If it is not worthwhile for a person like a Barney Visser, take Barney Visser.
Yeah.
If it's not worth it for him anymore to get involved in NASCAR, where are we going? I think we got to go way back because I can't sit here and tell you a spec car is going to take care of everything. I can't sit here and tell you a moving sidewalk, a moving escalator is going to bring all the fans back to the racetrack again. That's not necessarily going to happen. But what you need to do, I think, is go way back to that drawing board when things were good. Because I know people don't like to go backwards. People say, let's not go backwards. But sometimes it might be a good thing to look at older business models, look at what, like Matt was talking about. There's a lot of stuff for fans to do at the racetrack 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And you don't see it. How do we get that back? How do we do it?
Well, and I think too, you looked at the trackside live things that you used to have in the fan midways, and I know they try to bring that back in some.
I used to love that.
Yeah, I remember watching you on that.
I used to love that.
So I think that stuff was cool, and it became very interactive. And it's just like I think even if you go to a Panthers game or a Checkers game here in Charlotte, you want the fan interaction as a person buying a ticket. You want to go and have a good time. And I know I went to the Gastonia Grizzlies game. It's a little college baseball team here in Gastonia. Wouldn't know anything. But the fan experience of it is really fun. So like people go to it, and they're not televised, they're not anything, but people want to go to it because it's fun. And I think that's the more you can bring out the fun in it and fun for families, that's what we need to do. And I think that's cool if we can achieve those things.
Yeah. And talking about fan experience, we got Kansas coming up, and that's one track that does have a good fan experience. They got a lot going on around Kansas Motor Speedway. They got a casino there now. They've got, and just that general area all around the racetrack.
They built a whole city around it.
They did. They built a whole city around the racetrack. It's phenomenal what they've done.
Yeah.
But we got some drivers coming into Kansas that are a little behind the eight ball. They're probably pretty nervous. You look at Clint Boyer right now ahead of the cut line, but not one of his best racetracks, right? So Clint Boyer hasn't had great finishes there, so he's probably a little nervous.
Yeah.
And then you look at somebody like Keselowski behind the cut line. He needs to go in there and have a great run. So Kansas, I think, will be an interesting race this weekend, and it'll be interesting to see what it produces.
Yeah, Clint Boyer may have lost a race or two, but he never lost a party.
That's for sure.
And we don't really have a time limit, Josh, but we're almost over.
Yeah, we're getting close, so we need to get close to wrapping up. We got two fan questions, so I want to get.
And we got to leave time for the fans.
We got to leave time
we
for
can't
the
hog all
viewers.
the.
So 2 questions, and Matt, feel free to chime in on these if you have an opinion. Sarah from Charlotte, North Carolina asked, I'm considering getting my real estate license and becoming a broker. Where would you recommend going to school, and is the real estate test difficult to pass?
Well, I'll tell you, I personally went to Superior School, took some classes at Mingle. They're both fine. They're both great. All these real estate schools are accredited. I really enjoyed studying and taking the test. It was not easy. 78% passed the test. And can I say something really quickly here? My wife, Tracy, she's from a different state, took the North Carolina state test, and I call her a 38%er because only 38% passed that test the first time around. So if you look at those numbers, it's fairly difficult, but don't do it if you just want to do it for the heck of it. Be all in on it.
Matt, you're a real estate investor, and you don't have a broker license, right? So people can be involved in real estate and not necessarily have to have a broker's license. So,
there's
Sarah, I don't
different
know.
Levels.
Different levels. And I don't know what your reasoning is for wanting to become a broker. Feel free to reach out to us or any broker and get opinions. I personally went to Mingle School of Real Estate for my pre-licensing and have done all my post-licensing there. I think they do great work as well. Certainly Superior is a good one too.
Yeah, they're all good, and just it's what you want to make of it. It's how you want to take it.
Yeah.
And also probably don't go into it half.
It needs to be a full-time. If you want to be successful in real estate, I think you need to be a full-time. It's a full-time job for sure. Question number 2, Kevin from Lexington, North Carolina. And Matt, this is a good question with you on the show. He said, I've always been a big RCR fan and was shocked when they announced that Hemrick was moving up to the 31 Cup car for 2019. Do you think it is too early for him to move up since he hasn't won an Xfinity yet?
I think it's... in my opinion, it's not a shock at all. I think that if you look at RCR as a whole and what Daniel Hemrick has brought to that organization between last year and this year, and you see the progress we've made on the Xfinity side from there. Obviously, it goes to the people that have been involved, but from a teammate perspective, he's a guy who really moves the needle on the competition side of, okay, here's what we need to do on the R&D side. People forget that Daniel Hemrick is, believe either 27 or 28 years old, and he's been in racing just about every single year of his career since I think he was young like I was.
Matt, I have scars that are 27, so but Daniel's a great addition and just a good guy to have around.
And there's been examples in the past of Xfinity drivers not necessarily being crazy successful in Xfinity, although I say Daniel's been very successful in Xfinity. But you look at a Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson, one win.
Yeah, one win in Xfinity, and look what the guys went on to do at the Cup level. So,
I think he did okay.
No, I don't think it's too early for Daniel to move up at all.
No, and I think the other thing too is he in being in RCR, we've been on the brink of getting wins. I think he's finished third 7 times this season or something.
Yes.
I've gotten a second place. He's gotten a few second place finishes. All that is one circumstance of something going his way, and I think that's what people don't realize is that you got to be in position, but a part of it you got to have things go your way too. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see him win by the end of this year. I don't think it'd be shocking at all.
Yeah.
But I think you got to look at the people that are within striking distance, and you got to be in that conversation. I think he falls in that conversation. And I think you look at somebody who raises a team, as he has been involved with it. And I think that's why RCR ultimately wanted him in the 31 car.
Yeah, no, I agree. So great questions, folks. Thank you for asking them. Always remember, ask us questions. You can use hashtag R2RE. We are on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can message us. You can email us at racing2realestate@gmail.com. We love your questions. We always try to answer them on the show. Matt, man, we appreciate you coming on and joining us. You got a hell of a story, man. And I, it gives me goosebumps to hear you tell your experience. And, man, it's been good. I appreciate you coming.
Very bright future as well.
No, thank you very
sir.
much.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so we're going to take just a short 30-second break. Hear a quick word from our sponsor, Anchor Real Estate, and then, John, we will be back and clear to close. Anchor Real Estate is your boutique real estate company. Located in Mooresville, North Carolina, we emphasize personal relationships with cutting-edge marketing. Innovation through communication. We are Anchor Real Estate. Check us out at anchorre.com or follow us on social media.
And we're back on Racing to Real Estate. Josh, it is time for Clear to Close, our little closing thought at the end of each show. And all I want to say is, if you're involved in race broadcasting, I got one request for you. Please know how to pronounce the names of our competitors. It's not asking that much to know that Amarillo is a city in Texas. Almirola drives race cars. Hendricks played guitar. Hendrick owns race cars. It's that simple.
It is, John. That's a good little rant, and I agree. If you're going to make your primary source of income doing that job, at least
just know the names,
and pronounce them correctly. So real quick for me, I just wanted to touch. I've mentioned this several times now, but Lake Norman Humane. We have an event coming up, People Helping Pets. It's November 7th at the Langtree Plantation. Tickets are $50 a piece. We're going to have silent auction, a live auction. We're going to have food. We're going to have drinks. A lot of fun people there. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. We have tickets for sale. We did our Wind Down Wednesday last week here at the offices of Anchor Real Estate with Johnny Brusco's. A lot of fun. People showed up despite the windy and rainy weather from Hurricane
Michael. Got a fellow named Michael.
But that was a fun time. And, man, we got Kansas coming up for Cup and Xfinity cars. Trucks are off, but should be a good weekend. And
good times.
That's all I got, man. So we will look forward to next week with you guys. This is a wrap here for episode 6 of Racing to Real Estate. Hope you all enjoyed it.